When you meet someone, one of the first things they ask is, "What do you do for a living?" When I say I'm a wedding photographer, it's not uncommon for them to ask, "So how many bridezillas have you had?" I have to answer that honestly, pretty few. These brides are the stuff of legend and lore. Let's talk about them. Interestingly, but perhaps not unsurprisingly, I don't get asked about groomzillas. They're out there too, and I have some stories. But as much as bridezillas are in fact statistically uncommon in my personal experience, momzillas on the other hand I've met a few times. I do want to say here at the top of the video that this is a stereotype. People come in all stripes with a variety of personalities. Some are more easygoing and some less so. This is true in life everywhere you turn, so to single out brides in particular for behavior that doesn't adhere to gender or occur only at events like weddings would be unfair. Nice people are everywhere and jerks are everywhere. Fortunately, the nice people tend to outnumber the jerks, but they often don't make for interesting stories, so off we go! So what makes a bridezilla? If the mythology is true, they're an overly demanding, controlling, or difficult bride. They're characterized by a lack of respect for others, unrealistic expectations, and an inability to compromise. The true bridezilla is an all-day phenomenon. From start to finish, they make their bridesmaids, their families, and their vendors frustrated or downright angry. Some random examples that I've encountered are that they're mad that they couldn't get out-of-season flowers, wanted to have their outdoor ceremony in November after the temperature dropped into the 40s, and one where she insisted that a bridesmaid dye her hair so it wasn't prettier than hers. Some people have a personality where they do things for the approval of others. They'll put pressure on themselves to make their wedding live up to other people's expectations. They spent a full year, maybe more, planning this day, and maybe they've been thinking about it for longer than that. They've set high expectations for themselves to depict a particular image of their relationship and of their wedding. When reality deviates from that plan, that's when the Zilla can come out. After having photographed several hundred weddings, I can only point to 2 genuine bridezillas in my personal history. I think I've been able to avoid them, or they avoid me, largely because of how I market myself. I'm a pretty easygoing guy, and I work kind of organically. While I'm very organized in my work, I don't like to overplan because there's magic in the in-between times when we're not doing a first look or making portraits. I largely leave people alone so they can enjoy their day, and I document the moments that happen along the way. I think with photographers who have a more posed style or those who are a little more conventional in their work might attract those couples more because, being type A, they want to know what they're going to get. They may not appreciate the unexpected or the unanticipated, which I thrive on. I don't think they're looking for the authenticity a documentary wedding photographer brings to the table. I think they want to portray a specific and pre-planned image of themselves in their wedding. When I meet with couples, I think it becomes clear I'm not that personality, and I don't work in that way. I'm detail-oriented, but not micromanaging. Couples who are like that are probably more likely to hire vendors with similar personalities, and that's just not me. A couple have fallen through the cracks over the years, though. When I started in this business, I expected a correlation between how popular someone was in high school to their eventually becoming a bridezilla. On the rare occasion this phenomenon actually happens, it's usually just a person under stress. Planning a wedding doesn't have to be stressful, but it sometimes is. A venue closing 2 months before your wedding is stressful. Not being able to find your rings on the way to the ceremony is stressful. Hoping your future spouse doesn't find out about the time you hooked up with their best friend is stressful. The napkins being one shade different than what you saw online may not be what you originally envisioned, but that's not stressful. At least it doesn't have to be. When stress and nerves collide with family dynamics, and sometimes alcohol, plus the realization of how much money they're spending, accompanied by a year's worth of planning that's about to reach its finale, uncharacteristic behavior may come out. Humans are only human, and they should sometimes be given a little grace. That said, many years ago, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. It was a hard time, not just emotionally, but also with regard to the amount of time my sister and I had to devote to his care. Taking him to doctors and chemo and helping organize his bills while he succumbed to his illness was tough, but we managed. It was nearly a full-time job. While I didn't miss any weddings, I did have to contact my couples at the time to let them know what was going on in my life and that I wouldn't be able to deliver their photos as quickly as I'd originally hoped. Every single one was understanding. Family comes first, they told me. Take care of your dad and get us the photos when you can, they said. All except one. She emailed me 2 weeks after her engagement session to say, "I know your dad is sick, but enough is enough. I want my photos." And thus I was introduced to my first real bridezilla. I gained some insight into her character on her wedding day when her father gave a speech about how, even as a child, she had to have her way and would throw tantrums, sometimes publicly, when she didn't. Then her maid of honor gave a speech that included how it wasn't always easy to be her friend because of how controlling she could be and would shut people out who might disagree with her on whatever point. They were still besties because she, was still a good person deep down. That bride had fire in her eyes during those speeches. If she had mutant powers, she would have been shooting lasers out of her fingertips at those two. After the speeches, I saw from a distance she had words with both of them. There was much arm waving, and the groom came over, seemingly doing his best to calm her down, though he was caught across the torso at one point by her, shall we say, animated gesturing. So yeah, it wasn't just my experience with her, she was just that way. At the end of the wedding, her father stuck a wad of cash into my hand as a tip for having to put up with her. As for my second Bridezilla, I didn't have much indication that she would be this way prior to the wedding, but on the day of, I have to admit, she stuck needles into my last good nerve. She criticized me for the location of the family portraits, which she chose, told me my cameras and lighting weren't good enough to photograph weddings with, and that I wasn't photographing enough of the details, or of her family, or of them. Basically none of the things I was actually there to photograph. Oh, and that my then curly hair was somehow unprofessional. To the degree that particular issue may have been a problem, that has since been solved. I was also blamed for the sun being directly overhead, casting harsh shadows, even though they scheduled the ceremony for noon. For not everyone she wanted formals with being at the right place at the right time, which was at a not brief walk away from the reception venue, and for it being hot in July. When it came time for sunset portraits, I was actually afraid to approach her and her now husband, because she didn't put off just anger but wrath. Thankfully, my second took pity on me and asked if she could take them out for that part of the day, to which I agreed. After I delivered the photo, she emailed me to tell me she was so disappointed that she couldn't bring herself to even look at them. Because we wedding vendors often know one another, I reached out to the DJ and the venue to see if they had similar issues or if it was just me. Nope, she had contacted them about similar disappointments, and I was told the florist was included in the post-wedding abuse too. At least she didn't ask me for a refund like she did with a couple of them. So how did I react to and ultimately work with these particular brides? I understood that reacting emotionally would only escalate their emotional response. De-escalation is the name of the game here, so I did my best to stay calm and professional. Something I mentioned in a previous video is that people often just want to be heard. So to try and level out their reaction to my reaction, I did my best to listen and acknowledge their concerns. Finally, I had a job to do, so at certain points I had to take a step back and concentrate on the task at hand. I didn't want to get into a debate or an argument, but at the same time, I wasn't going to stand there and let someone abuse me. Their response to whatever perceived injustice they were feeling was less about me than it was about them. It's unfortunate but true. Bridezillas and groomzillas, for that matter, aren't just folklore. Some personalities shine brighter and burn hotter under the pressures of wedding planning, but those pressures are often self-imposed. If I or anyone else thinks a particular thing isn't stressful, another person might think that it is. When that happens, individual quirks and coping mechanisms come to the front. That said, some people are just this way. I'm an optimist, so I hate to just write off anyone based on one bad day. But on that day, no amount of understanding or people skills are going to placate them. Despite my best efforts at communication, managing expectations, and de-escalation with whatever skills I've learned over the years, if they're determined to have a bad time, you unfortunately just can't appease this personality type. Some brides just want to watch the world burn. Thankfully, I've personally had limited exposure to real bridezillas, because this is not every bride by a long shot, nor is this characteristic exclusive to brides. If nothing else, these encounters serve as reminders that grace and compassion can go a long way. While the occasional meltdown might make for a good story, patience and professionalism are what's going to get you as the photographer through the day. Dealing with these personality types can be challenging, but focusing on delivering results and maintaining your professionalism can make it easier to navigate. Despite all the planning, weddings are often imperfect. The truth is, it's those imperfections that can sometimes end up being meaningful after the day has passed, and they can also make the best stories. What are your thoughts on how I handled these particular brides? Could I or should I have done something differently? And do you have any stories of your own to share? Please let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your spending a few minutes with me. If you like this kind of video, please like and subscribe. If you'd like to see more videos like this, check out this other one I made for you. This is Ask a Wedding Photographer. I'm Seth K, and I'm here to help.